You know, the haunting of John's crimes, that'll never go away. It's a part of my life. As much as I tried to forget it, it took me a long time to heal. For 30 years, I never spoke about it. And now I think it's time. There's so much to still tell and a lot of truths to come out that have never been spoken. There was a lot of people that didn't even know that. I had a brother, and they didn't even know that he was John Wayne Gacy.
Investigators have started to dismantle Gacy's house and garage as they continue to search for other bodies in this quiet suburban neighborhood.
How can you do that? How can any human being do that? A lot of people say, how could you still have loved him? It's because I didn't know. There was evil there that was hidden in a side that he never showed. I would have never expected the boy in this picture to have done what he did 15 years later. I would have never expected it. You know, John and I had a unique childhood. Mom always had John watch out for me, being the youngest, so he always had to take me everywhere. I was like his sidekick. I was like the tag-along sister. I called him my protector because he was always there, kind of watching over me. As we got older as teenagers, we bonded and we were friends as well as brother and sister. But I've never seen the killer part of him that did what he did. All I remember is how he was growing up. Why did he set his mind into killing? John wasn't like the other boys in the neighborhood. They were into football in the winter and baseball and all the different sports types things. He liked to plant flowers. He liked to sing. I don't know very many of the boys in the neighborhood that would get in the kitchen and make grilled cheese sandwiches and try to bake cookies. It kind of made my dad upset because he wanted him to be a manly man, and he thought my brother was not a manly man. Dad would come home from work.
Good Lord. What are you doing, boy?
I had to bake us a pie.
If John was baking or cooking or planting marigolds, then the razor strap came out.
Come here, boy.
Come on, he is just trying to
Don't
please you.
stick up for him. I said come here.
It was scary because if he was drunk, we never knew how hard that beating was going to be.
One.
But John didn't go to defend himself at all. It's like he was like a punching bag. He didn't fight back. He didn't try to fight off the spanking. He just took it.
Next time you ought to go outside and play some football.
He always went up to his room and closed the door. What he was doing, I have no idea, but he wouldn't talk to anybody afterwards. This is a picture of a fishing trip that John went on with my dad. And I see the look on John's face, the scowl. I saw that look a lot at the table in the kitchen. When he was getting yelled at, he would just make that face and just kind of look down. John would pay me to clean his room because he didn't like changing sheets and stuff. So I would clean his room, dust and whatever, and then he'd give me like a little allowance for doing it. And I went in there to do that, and I noticed kind of a silky colored material in his bed, and when I pulled the sheets back, it ended up being underpants. Ladies' silk underwear. It was just kind of mystified me that he had pants in his bedroom that were women's.
Mom,
What is it, honey?
I found these.
When your brother was young, she said he used to like silk panties, and he used to take the silk panties and rub them with his fingers. He just liked the feel of the silk. And I said, that's just a strange thing. Why would he take them and hide underwear?
You've got to promise me, really promise me, okay, that you're not going to talk to your father about this.
I promise.
She said, keep it to yourself. She said, I'll handle it.
I will get rid of these.
John and my mom had a very, very close relationship. She went to talk to him about it. I did not know what she said to him, but John wasn't real happy with me that I went to Mom with it. He said I should have come to him with it. He was very upset with me. In the weeks to follow, when I changed bedding, there was no more pants to be found. So whatever it was ended. John and Dad had had an argument, and one day John didn't come home. He'd gone off to work, and he never showed back. And it was real shocking that after 3 days, they couldn't find him.
What are you so worked up about, Marion?
You could have a little empathy here. You know, he's your son, too.
I was scared, because that's not like John. John was usually pretty much like clockwork. As days went on, I became more concerned because I wondered if he was dead. He was actually ended up gone for almost 3 months, and they found him in Las Vegas, working in a mortuary. I believe that he stayed another couple of months before he came back home. It was a different John. It was totally a different John. He wasn't the brother I grew up with.
Well, I couldn't stomach that myself. You didn't have a hard time with it at all?
No, it was just a job.
We asked him about the mortuary work, and he started telling Mom and I what he did, and it just kind of creeped me out. He was telling us stories about, the dead bodies and whatever, and it was like, whoa.
But surely you didn't have to touch the bodies in the wall, did you?
We're all gonna die someday.
He did the cleanup of the room that they worked in. To think of John out there in Vegas cleaning up and seeing all these dead people and it not fazing him at all. It was really a bizarre thing, but he said it never bothered him at all.
Anyway, we're really happy you're home, John.
When he came back from Vegas, it's like he wanted a different life, and he didn't share as many things with me as he had before. Before, we went a lot of places together. He no longer invited me to go eat, have a pizza. We just kind of parted until we both got married. We were friends, but it was different. It was just totally different. It wasn't the same relationship.
what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with me?
John, can you just calm down?
And it wasn't like he was just angry and yelling. He was trying to hit him. He was acting like a crazy man. Over the years, it seemed like the older he started getting, I think whatever was transpiring when he was younger, I think was transforming as he got older. You take these and you look at that and you see how sad his face is. The face told it all the time with him. My uncle needed to move. And so I got my husband-to-be and my brother to help get the heavy stuff moved.
So after the wedding, you're just gonna what? Have kids, get old, wait for your days to run out?
John was kind of kidding us about getting married, and Ron made a crack about my mom.
Come on, you think Karen would let that happen?
Yeah, well.
She's no pushover like your mother, John.
John took offense to it, and he blew up.
What'd you just say about my mom?
I just said that.
No, I heard what you said.
John said something about, don't say that about my mother.
Come on, John, he was kidding.
I don't care what he was trying to do. He doesn't get to talk about mom that way.
Okay, take it easy.
You want me to take it easy?
John!
And a fight ensued.
Hey, what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with me?
John, can you just calm down?
You say one word about my mother and I'll slap you.
He was swearing. He was acting like a crazy man. It wasn't like he was just angry and yelling. He was trying to hit him.
Hey, what's wrong with me?
That wasn't John. John didn't hit people. He started pounding on the car and beating on the roof and on the window of the car. I don't know what's wrong with you. I said, I don't know why you're acting this way. It's just, it was crazy. And Ron slowly moved away because I told Ron, just move. He's away from the car. Move. Just get out of here. For a couple of days, we didn't even speak. He goes to work at Nunbush Shoes, and he's there for a couple of years, and then he meets Marlon. Marlon is his first wife. Him and Marlon had a little boy, and about 2 years later, I think they had a little girl. And they moved into Iowa. John, you could tell that he was settled. He was happy. I believe he really loved her. And he was proud to be a father. He was loving. It was just a new chapter for John. He was just a different person. I get a phone call from my mom one day, and she tells me that my brother's been arrested in Iowa, and he's in jail. And accused of sodomy of 2 boys. The judge said because of the age of the victims, he was going to send out a message that wasn't going to be tolerated, and he sentenced him, I believe, to 10 years in prison. We didn't get to talk to him until after the trial was over.
Look, I know this looks bad. Okay, I was only doing my duties as a member.
What do you mean, duties?
Well, I mean...
He told the whole family it was a political thing. John joined the JC chapter. I believe it's the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And he was explaining to us that the job was to bring men into the JCs He was the recruitment person. And one of the things they did was they'd have these parties with booze and pornographic movies.
So what about the other members? Why won't they speak up?
It's politics, and these guys just don't want to go down with me.
He never admitted and owned up to the sodomy.
But what about these charges, John?
He had showed the boys the movie, but all the other stuff didn't happen.
Mom, I can't believe you're buying any of this garbage.
He said, I'm not a homosexual. He was very convincing. When he talked about something, he could convince you. There's just something about him that he was very believable.
Don't worry, John. We're going to do everything in our power to get you out. Okay, son?
There were strings pulled. It was John reinventing himself again. He was a leader, and I'm really believing that that's why they paroled him so early.
This one is Pogo. This is my uncle in full clown dress. You know, it used to be a good memory. Now it makes me wonder, what's he hiding behind the makeup? The first time that I actually did get to see my uncle in his clown costume, it was for the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Chicago.
Hiya, kids! My name's Pogo, the silly dancing clown.
He was at a function afterwards. He was all in full attire, clown makeup, everything like that. And he was smiling, and he made a good clown. He seemed happy, and he was waving at people, still giving candy.
Do you kids want a balloon?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just, uh-oh.
It was the first time we'd seen him in his makeup, and you couldn't even recognize him. I never really put a lot of thought as it being like an evil thing. It was just something that made him happy.
Smile for the camera, Pogo.
Now it's like, what were you trying to hide? He was like trying to be a normal part of society, but really had another life going on.
I will never understand why people focus on a clown as being a bad thing. I do know there's people that are afraid of clowns for some reason. And I guess knowing that he had been convicted of sodomy, they tried to look at him as dressing up maybe to fool children. I saw him with my own children, with his children, my sister's children. I never saw him do anything sinister. Everybody wants to put something cynical about it. And I saw nothing cynical. John really did love kids. The first time I saw the house that John and Mom moved into, my first reaction was the smell. There was a smell as you walked in the house and through the house. Just had this old, musty smell.
What is that awful smell?
I'm not sure. I don't even know what you're talking about.
It's making me nauseous. How can you stand it?
The house wasn't built on a slab. It was dirt underneath it, and if you don't cover that, it smells. My mom didn't have any clue that it had a smell.
John, have you tried to figure out where the stench is coming from?
Oh, that. Yeah, I looked into that.
When I asked him about the smell, he said it was coming from the earth underneath. There was a crawl space under the house. Very small opening to get down. And there was a ladder that went down. Wasn't very deep. That was just where the odor was coming from.
I learned the first time it rained that this ground gets wet under there, and then the crawl space puts out a musty odor. There was always a musty odor in that house.
And this just clicked when I heard his statement. I remember him saying in Cook County Jail, I should have cemented the crawl space. I don't know why I didn't cement the crawl space. And I looked at him and I said, what would that have solved? And he didn't answer me. He started a painting and decorating business. Later, it went into construction, and he started hiring young men to work for him. I noticed the difference in him. He's glassy-eyed. He popped pills. He was shorter in temper.
This isn't healthy, John. You're killing yourself.
He was complaining about the long hours, and if you want it done right, you've got to do it yourself.
You aren't helping yourself by hiring these boys.
They're not boys. They are young men.
I said, why don't you hire adults? Why are you hiring kids? I said, and they're not dependable. Why do you hire kids? He said, because they work for cheaper labor. I said, you really need to hire older people. And he said, I'll run my business the way I want to run my business.
Well, I'm sure there are other ways.
Look, why don't you just mind your own business, Karen? Huh?
And then there was a couple of strange incidents that had happened. There was a couple of boys that ended up gone missing. And they were two people that actually worked for him. Sometimes he's out till 2, 3 in the morning. You wonder, what was he doing till 3 o'clock in the morning? Well, John had got a new car, but on the driver's side, there was one of these hand lights that I know that I've seen on police cars. And I said, and what's that for? And he said, well, I have to use it sometimes when I'm out in the neighborhood to shine up on the house to see the addresses. I thought that was odd because most time people go to work during the daytime. I learned later that he was using it to pretend that he was a police officer, that supposedly he even had a badge to kind of lure a prospect to his car. I didn't at the time tie this together at all. It didn't make sense to me, but you know, John sometimes didn't make sense with some of the things he did, so I just, I just blew it off. Time was running short. I get the phone call, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I know when the phone rings at that time, it cannot be good news.
John?
He said there are some police at my door. They want to talk to me.
That was Christmas, and I want to say that was at my Uncle John's house, and that was definitely a happy memory. Memories like this, those are the memories I choose to hang on to. before I knew what he turned into.
The weekend of Thanksgiving when John was there was a sense of urgency in everything he was doing. He wasn't agitated, but it was like he had a sense of time was running short.
John, you really didn't have to do this, you know?
I know. I really wanted to. I mean, I love you guys.
He wanted to buy things for me, wanted to buy things for the kids when he was kind of insistent. And so we had a great time shopping, but you could tell there was something on his mind. He was charging everything and wasn't paying cash. I didn't know what was going on with him.
You sure everything's okay?
Karen, everything is fine.
You sure?
And I tried to get him to, how's things going, the business going well, stuff like that. But he didn't open up to anything at all.
Here. I gotta take off anyway. We'll talk soon, yeah?
Now I know why he did it. I think that he knew that someone was catching on. In December 1978, John called, and when he was talking to us on the phone, there was somebody at the door. And he said, there are some police at my door. They want to talk to me. There was a kid at the drugstore that went missing one day when I had been in the drugstore, so they're questioning everybody that was in the drugstore that day.
That's awful. Did you happen to see him or something?
I said, is there something going on, something we need to talk about or anything? And he said, no, don't worry about it.
I just want to make sure you're okay.
He was trying to blow it off, but at the same time, when John did something wrong or something wasn't right, I could tell in the tone of his voice.
Just let me know if you need anything.
That really worried me. That was the first time I think I got very, very concerned. A couple of days later, I get the phone call, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I know when the phone rings at that time, it cannot be good news. And it was a strange voice on the phone, one I didn't recognize, and he said, I'm your brother's lawyer. John has been arrested.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
Suspicion of murder. I was silent at first. I said, can I talk with John? And he said, let me see if they'll let you talk to him. So he did get the phone.
John, what are they talking about?
I said, did you kill somebody? And he said, yes. I've probably seen this picture a couple of times in the newspaper when they first booked him. And I can tell you that I hated this picture. And do you know why? Not because he's arrested on here and he's being booked in, because he's smiling. How can somebody have just been arrested for the murder of some missing boy? You can see he's laughing. How could you, as a human being, look at that and not hate him? I don't want to look at it. I don't have one of these anymore because I did tear the one I had up. So. Oh, that's upsetting. Oh, I just might need a second. Each day it got worse and worse and worse. And we started dreading even turning on the news. And then they're talking about there could be more.
Mom?
I didn't want to live anymore. So I took a bottle of pills and took them all.
This morning, police searched Gacy's home and found the decomposed remains of 3 bodies, dirt crawl space under the house. They suspect there are several more bodies buried here.
It's creepy that we might have been in that house and there had been bodies buried under it. My first reaction was, did Mom and him buy a house that somebody buried bodies under? That was my very first reaction. Each day it got worse and worse and worse because they weren't finished with their investigation.
Police today found 6 more bodies under the John Gacy house. The 6 bodies bring the total found under this house and garage to 15, all appearing to have been teenaged boys and young men.
That's when our life changed. All the lives that he took, all the families he took their siblings or their sons away. We saw one side of him, and it wasn't that side of him.
The police have found, at last count, 27 bodies buried under his house and garage, and 2 more in a nearby river.
How can somebody knew so well, grew up with, we were born from the same mother, had the same father, and then do all of what he did? I asked that myself that so many times, and there's not an answer. There's not an answer.
When they paint the image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies, I said, this is ludicrous.
I said, what do you mean you didn't do all this? How did all those bodies get under the house if you didn't do it? He said, I can show you who I knew. And he started pointing with his finger. These are the pictures that he was pointing to, and he literally pointed to faces in the newspaper saying, I didn't know this person, I didn't know that person, so how could I have killed them?
I have no knowledge of the crime whatsoever. Never have had. Go ahead and kill me, but you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
How could he act so innocent, like he didn't do anything? Is that a mental problem? He's too sane for it to be a mental problem. How can you be insane 33 times? There was nothing insane about him. It was like a nightmare, just a total nightmare. We started getting phone calls, people threatening to harm our children, like in retaliation for what John had done. We couldn't let our kids go to school. We couldn't even go to work. We just couldn't face people day after day. And it's like, it's never ending. I kept thinking about the families, the family members of these boys. I can't explain the desperation, the hurt, the shame. You feel that you just can't go any further. It's sort of like going on a hill and you just know you just need to drop off. I didn't want to live anymore. So I took a bottle of pills and took them all.
It was a little after midnight, and I happened to get up because my son, he needed a bottle, and I went out to the kitchen.
Mom, what's wrong? Mom?
And my mother was leaning over the sink, and she had taken a bottle of pills.
Mom, what'd you do? Oh my God.
I was yelling at her. I was like, how many of these did you take? And she couldn't answer me. And she just kept saying, I just want to die. Just let me die. The only thing I knew to do was to call my dad. He took her to the emergency room, and they pumped her stomach.
It's not a time in my life that I am very proud of because I feel like I failed my children. If I had ended my life, what would have happened to them? I just couldn't take anymore. A lot of people ask me about the death sentence and what I feel about it. And when it came to John and his sentence, I think it more than fit the crime. It was like it wasn't even a shock to me. It was like, okay, yeah, I knew that. I wasn't even upset over it. We spent about an hour or so visiting John. He really didn't talk too much about the execution. He talked about what his last meal was going to be, what he was going to eat. This picture is of John and I. And you can see how he takes his handcuffs and kind of goes around me. And while it wasn't a happy time, we both were smiling. And I think it was out of love for one another. It's like you're not thinking about the crime. You're just thinking about he's going to die. And I was just trying to make his last hours more meaningful for him. Still trying to be the dutiful sister. It was killing me. I just said, I love you. Know that. And I did love him. I hated what he did. But I loved him as a brother. But I didn't love him as a brother that killed. I loved him as the brother that protected me all the way through my life until he did what he did. And that was it. I never talked to him or saw him again.
John Wayne Gacy, it's time for you to die!
When we walked from the death house, they were setting up some tents and stuff in almost the front yard of the prison. That was really horrible because they're shouting out the windows at you.
Kill that clown! Kill that clown! Kill that clown!
I think that was probably worse than being there with John saying goodbye.
At 12:58 a.m., his last words were in essence that taking his life would not compensate for the loss of the others. And he basically said that he saw this as the state murdering him, and he didn't think that would serve justice.
I'd never heard that. I don't remember hearing that at all. It makes me feel angry that he made that kind of statement. I mean, that blows me away. What about serving the families that he crushed? I don't know why he didn't say something about the families. I thought that's what he had said. Makes me ashamed of him, really. Not that, how much more shameful can I get? I thought he made his peace with God, and it makes me know that he didn't make his peace with God, because he wouldn't have said something like that. When I see this picture of John and my dad and his little son, I wish I could turn the clock back to that time. I could almost cry when I look at this picture. John looked content.
It began on a warm September night in 2003 in the small coastal town of Palmetto Bay, Florida. The air was heavy with salt and humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and carries the faint buzz of insects through open windows. The town slept under the orange haze of streetlights, quiet, routine, unremarkable, until 9:47 p.m., when a single 911 call shattered the silence. A mother's voice, trembling, broken. "My daughter's gone. She was right here. Please, you have to help me." The dispatcher could barely make out the words between the sobs. A teenage girl, 15, vanished from her own bedroom. No sound, no struggle, just gone. Her name was Amber Delaney, a sophomore at Southridge High. Track team, honor roll, bright, kind, the kind of kid who smiled at strangers. The police arrived within minutes, sirens cutting through the humid night. Neighbors came out in robes and sandals, whispering on their porches. In a town where nothing ever happened, suddenly everyone was awake. Officers combed the property, back door locked, windows shut from the inside. No sign of forced entry. Her phone on the nightstand, shoes by the bed. The only thing missing was Amber, and a faint smell of cigarette smoke near the window. By midnight, the street was sealed off with yellow tape. Reporters from the local news station showed up before dawn. "Missing teen from Palmetto Bay," the Chiron read. A photo of Amber, wide smile, freckles across her cheeks, flashed across every screen in southern Florida by morning. The community mobilized fast. Flyers went up on every lamppost. Search parties fanned through the mangroves and canal banks. The sheriff's office brought in dogs, divers, volunteers. Nothing. No scent, no trace. It was as if she had been swallowed by the night itself. Detective Michael Raines, 20 years on the force, took the lead. He'd seen runaways, he'd seen abductions. But something about this one felt different. The locked windows. The untouched room. The mother's shaking hands. He told his team, "This isn't random. Whoever did this knew her. Knew the house." And for the next several weeks, that theory was all they had. The investigation swept through Amber's life piece by piece. Her friends, her teachers, her social circle. She wasn't dating anyone. No signs of trouble at home. But one name kept coming up. Brian Keller, 35, a family friend. He lived 2 houses down. Known to mow their lawn when Mr. Delaney was away on business. Uncle Brian, the kids used to call him. Kind, reliable, always around. He'd coached Amber's little brother in baseball. He even helped set up her birthday decorations that summer. A neighbor everyone trusted. But in every interview, his presence lingered, subtle, quiet, too convenient. Raines interviewed him 3 days after the disappearance. Keller appeared calm, almost rehearsed. "I saw her that afternoon," he said. "She was walking home from school, waved at me. That's it. No nervous tics, no stumbles." But Raines caught something. A faint scratch on his hand, fresh, just below the thumb. "Work accident," Keller explained with a laugh. "Old fence post. You know how it is." The detective noted it. Small detail, easily forgotten, yet it lingered like a splinter in his mind. Days turned to weeks. Leads dried up. Tips came in from across the county. Sightings, rumors, false alarms. One man claimed he saw Amber at a gas station near Miami. Another swore she'd been seen boarding a bus to Georgia. Every tip ended the same way, nowhere. The media frenzy faded. The posters curled in the sun. By December, the case went cold. Raines kept her photo pinned to his wall anyway, under the heading "Missing," unresolved. Every so often he'd look at it, that frozen smile, wondering what he'd missed. Years passed. The Delaney family moved away, unable to bear the empty room. Palmetto Bay went back to being quiet again. But not the same kind of quiet. The kind that breathes heavy, like the town itself knows it's keeping a secret. Then came 2023. 20 years later. Technology had evolved, databases expanded, forensic science leapt forward. A new state initiative, Project Resolve, reopened unsolved missing persons cases across Florida. Detective Rains, long retired, got a call from the new chief. "We're reprocessing evidence from the Delaney case," she said. "You should see this." He drove back to the station that same afternoon. The same old building, the same cracked linoleum floors. On the desk sat a sealed evidence bag from 2003, a scrap of fabric recovered near the canal, dismissed back then as unrelated. Now, under advanced DNA profiling, it told a different story. The lab matched trace DNA on the fabric to a known sample in the state database. The result hit like a thunderclap. Brian Keller, the friendly neighbor, the man who'd cried at Amber's vigil. His DNA had never been in the system before, until 2020, when he was arrested for a minor assault in another county and quietly released. That record, newly digitized, had just connected him to a 20-year-old ghost. Detectives obtained a warrant. They went to Keller's property, the same house, same porch swing, everything frozen in time. He'd aged grayer, slower, still polite. When they told him why they were there, he didn't speak for a full minute. Just stared at the floor. "You think I did this?" he finally said. The officers didn't answer. They didn't have to. Inside his garage, in a locked trunk under a tarp, they found what changed everything. A box of old keepsakes. Photos, ribbons, trinkets. And one item that froze every man in that room. A silver charm bracelet, engraved with the initials AD, Amber Delaney. Keller said it was a gift she forgot one summer. But the chain was broken, the clasp twisted. Forensic tests confirmed it. Traces of blood matching Amber's old medical sample from a high school clinic record. That tiny bracelet became the bridge between 2003 and now. Suddenly, the case wasn't just reopened. It was alive. The arrest came at dawn. Cameras caught him being led away, head down, expression blank. The headline hit the same local station that once covered her disappearance. Florida 2003 cold case solved. Family friend charged after new evidence. Viewers who had been children in 2003 watched in disbelief. The man who used to bring cookies to neighborhood barbecues, the man who helped search for Amber, was now accused of her murder. The community froze. Old neighbors dug up photos of him smiling beside the Delaneys, laughing over birthday cake. "It doesn't make sense," one said. "He was like family." But evidence doesn't lie. The DNA on the fabric, the bracelet, the matching fibers found in his trunk lining. It built a quiet, relentless case. He denied everything, of course. Claimed he'd found the bracelet years later in his yard. Claimed the DNA transfer was a mix-up. But investigators found more. An old Polaroid of Amber, taken at the park 2 days before she vanished. She's smiling, sitting on a bench. Behind her, half hidden in the frame, stands a man in sunglasses. Keller. When confronted, he said it was coincidence. Said he was just walking by. But Rains, brought in as consultant for closure, knew the truth before the forensics did. "He never left this town because he thought he'd beaten it," the old detective murmured. But the past always catches up. As the state prepared formal charges, more pieces began to surface. A neighbor, now in her 60s, recalled seeing Keller's truck parked near the canal that night, around 10 p.m. "Didn't think much of it," she said. "He was always out late fixing things." Another neighbor remembered hearing a loud noise, like a screen door slam, but dismissed it. Ordinary sounds on an ordinary night. Only now did they make sense. Still, one question haunted everyone. Where was Amber? Even with Keller in custody, her body had never been found. The search resumed with new urgency. Teams scoured the canal again, the nearby woods, old construction zones. Drones, sonar, cadaver dogs. 2 decades later, the ground had shifted, memories faded, evidence eroded. But the hope, or the fear, remained. The Delaney family, long relocated to North Carolina, returned for the first time in years. Her mother, visibly older but still composed, stood before the press and said softly, "I don't need revenge. I just want to bring my daughter home." Her words rippled through the crowd, through every living room that still remembered that missing poster in 2003. As the cameras rolled, Rains watched from the sidelines. He hadn't slept in days. The evidence, the headlines, the courtroom preparations, they all blurred together. But one thing remained sharp. The sound of that first 911 call, 20 years ago. A mother's voice breaking over static. He'd replayed it countless times in his mind. And now, finally, maybe there was an answer. Or maybe just the beginning of one. Night fell again over Palmetto Bay. The street where Amber once lived was quieter than ever, Houses repainted, families moved on. Only one home, Keller's, sat in darkness, sealed with police tape. The air was thick, heavy still. Somewhere beyond the mangroves, the crickets hummed the same song they had that night in 2003. Time had folded in on itself. The case once thought dead now breathed again. And beneath the quiet surface of this Florida town, the question still pulsed like an open wound. How could the monster be someone they all knew? They brought him into the interview room, just after noon, under flat fluorescent light and the slow rattle of an old air conditioner. The walls were bare, the table scarred, the 2 metal chairs placed just a little too close. Brian Keller sat cuffed, shoulders squared but eyes down, like a man bracing for a wave he couldn't see coming. On the other side of the one-way glass, younger detectives leaned in, their reflections mixing with his. For them he was a suspect, a file number, a headline. For Detective Michael Rains, watching from the hallway, he was the living embodiment of every unanswered question from 2003. Rains stepped in without ceremony and closed the door with a soft click that sounded louder than it needed to. He dropped a thin file on the table and sat opposite Keller, leaving the cuffs between them like a third presence. For a long moment they just looked at each other, the years stacked silently on the table. Then Rains reached into the file and slid a single photograph across the metal surface. Amber's school portrait, the same one that had once stared down from every telephone pole in Palmetto Bay. Her smile, frozen at 15, landed between them like evidence and accusation at the same time. "You remember her," Rains said, voice low, steady, carrying none of the noise roaring in his head. Keller's gaze flicked to the picture, lingered, then rolled away to a crack in the wall. "Everybody remembers her," he answered. "You made sure of that." There was no sarcasm in the words, only a tired observation, as if he were commenting on the weather. Rains spread the rest of the evidence in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The lab report tying Keller's DNA to the scrap of fabric, the photograph of the silver bracelet with its broken clasp, the inventory sheet from the trunk in his garage. Each item landed with a dull tap, building a story without needing a narrator. "You helped us search," Rains reminded him. "You stood on that field with a candle in your hand and told the cameras you wished you could do more. All this time, this was sitting in your house." His finger rested on the bracelet. "Explain that." "I did," Keller said, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I found it in my yard. Kids drop things. She was always coming and going. I kept it because I thought she might come looking for it." He swallowed, throat working. "She never did." The explanation sat there, thin as paper. It didn't match the locked trunk, the tarp, the hidden box of keepsakes arranged like a private shrine. It didn't match blood on the chain. "Your DNA is at the canal," Rains went on. "Her blood is on this bracelet. Her photo is in your garage. That's not bad luck, Brian. That's a pattern." Keller lifted his eyes then, and for the first time since they'd brought him in, there was something sharp behind them. "You want this to be me," he said quietly. "You need it to be. You think you failed that family 20 years ago, and this is how you make it right." His cuffed hands shifted, the chain clinking softly. "But wanting a story to end a certain way doesn't make it true." The words cut deeper than Rains let show. Inside the room, he didn't bite. "The story we tell doesn't matter," he said. "The evidence does. And right now, it's pointing straight at you." He let the silence swallow the sentence and watched for the tiny reactions the camera loved. The hitch of breath, the twitch of fingers, the glance toward the door. Keller gave him almost nothing. At the Harrow house, the curtains trembled before the door opened. Mrs. Harrow stood there in a faded housecoat, eyes glassy but sharp. She'd watched the Delaney kids walk past her window every morning for years. She'd watched the news today too. "I told the other officers I hoped it was a stranger," she said, hands twisting a dish towel. "That made it easier to live here. You know." The detectives nodded, though they didn't, not really. "If it's him," she went on, voice dropping, "if it's someone we waved to, someone who borrowed sugar, then this whole street is wrong. All of us. We didn't see what was right in front of us." At the forensic lab across town, the air smelled of alcohol wipes and warmed plastic. Technicians in gloves and masks bent over Keller's truck like surgeons. Every inch of the interior was photographed, swabbed, vacuumed. They cut small squares from the trunk lining and fed them into machines that hummed in an impersonal, patient way. Technology that hadn't existed the summer Amber vanished, now read the microscopic residue of lives that had touched that vehicle. Dirt, pollen, fibers, trace organic compounds. Most of it meaningless noise. Some of it not. Late one night, A young analyst named Ortega leaned closer to a monitor as a faint peak surfaced on a graph. The signal was weak, degraded, barely clawing its way above the baseline. She compared it against controls, checked the calibration, reran the sample. The same trace appeared, stubborn and small. It wasn't strong enough to say what, or who, but the pattern suggested human decomposition compounds had once been trapped in the trunk fabric. Not enough for a definitive statement in court, but enough to tighten the noose of suspicion. While the lab machines whispered in numbers and graphs, the emotional fallout exploded in louder, messier ways. At the motel paid for by the state, the Delaney's tried to sleep in a room that smelled faintly of bleach and stale air. They hadn't set foot in Palmetto Bay in years. The town existed for them only as a preserved nightmare. The street, the bedroom, the vigil candles melted into puddles of wax. Now it was all back, vivid and unavoidable. Karen sat on the edge of the bed, fingers white around a styrofoam cup of lukewarm tea. Mark stared at the muted television, where a news ticker crawled with their daughter's name, just like it had in 2003. "Do you believe it's him?" she asked finally, eyes on the floor. Mark hesitated, the question landing heavier than it sounded. "I think," he answered slowly, "that I know how much I want it to be him." He turned toward her, face lined with 2 decades of what-ifs. "If it's not, then we're back at zero. No answers. No face. Just a hole where our daughter should be." "I don't know if I can," he broke off, the sentence collapsing under its own weight. In the parking lot beneath a flickering street lamp, Rains stood with a cigarette burning down between his fingers, the ember a tiny red eye in the dark. He'd quit years ago, but the habit had come back the moment the call about the DNA match came in. He drew in smoke and let it out slowly, watching it twist away into the humid Florida night. Keller's words replayed on a loop. "If you've convinced yourself otherwise, then you're going to miss whoever really did." They'd been delivered calmly, almost gently, but they gnawed like a splinter under the skin. He thought about the original investigation, about all the paths they'd walked, and all the ones they hadn't. Back then the focus had narrowed quickly to people close to Amber. The locked windows, the lack of struggle, the ordinary order of her room. It had screamed familiarity. Someone she trusted. Someone who knew how to slip in and out without leaving a storm behind. There had been other threads too, thin, awkward, easy to overlook. An anonymous tip about a dark sedan parked down the street, that night with its lights off. A gas station clerk who thought he'd seen a girl matching Amber's description hours later, getting into a car with someone older. A classmate who mentioned she'd been texting with someone new, online the week before she vanished. None of it had gone nowhere exactly. It had just gone cold. Inside her office, green new headlines didn't win trials. Evidence did, and evidence in a 20-year-old case came with holes big enough for a defense attorney to drive a truck through. She flipped through the old notebooks and intake forms, tracing faded ink with her fingertip. There were gaps everywhere. A patrol officer's log page torn out. A tip-line message about a suspicious car that led nowhere. A neighbor's statement that contradicted her own memory years later. The truth lived somewhere inside that tangle, but it didn't wear a name tag. Green called Rains in and pushed the file toward him across her desk. "Your instinct," she said. "Simple question. Is he our guy?" Rains looked down at Amber's photograph, paper-clipped to the front. The same smile, the same freckles, the same eyes that stared at him from the corkboard in his home office, where he'd never quite been able to take her down. He thought about the bracelet in the trunk, the DNA on the fabric, the trace in the car, the years of casual proximity. He thought about Keller standing on that vigil field, candle in hand, eyes wet. He thought about a mother downtown who just wanted somewhere to send her grief. "My instinct," he answered at last, "is that the story fits too well to feel clean. But sometimes the ugliest truths are the ones that fit." Green studied him for a second, searching his lined face. "That your way of saying yes?" "It's my way of saying," he replied, "that if we're wrong, we're not just ruining the wrong man's life. We're locking the door on whoever still hasn't been caught." Outside, thunder rumbled low over Palmetto Bay, the kind that vibrated in window panes before the rain actually came. Streetlights flickered on along the block where the Delaney house still stood, repainted and repopulate, trying and failing to be just another address. In living rooms across town, televisions glowed with the same face. A younger Amber in grainy footage, running on a track, laughing in slow motion. Underneath, the words crawled in stark white. Florida 2003 cold case solved. Family friend charged after new evidence. To the cameras, it looked like an ending. To the people who'd lived with that absence for 20 years, It felt more like the moment before a verdict, when everyone in the room holds their breath and realizes they might not like what they're about to hear. The morning after the arrest, Palmetto Bay woke up to its own reflection on every screen. The same drone shot of the quiet street. The same slow pan across yellow tape in front of Keller's house. The same file photo of Amber, smiling at a world that no longer existed. Local anchors used words like closure and justice at last. They showed neighbors shaking their heads, saying they were shocked but not surprised. As if those two things could live in the same sentence without tearing it apart. Underneath, the headline stayed fixed, crawling like a verdict. Florida 2003 cold case solved. Family friend charged after new evidence. Inside a stark interview room at the county jail, the story sounded very different. Keller sat at one end of the table in a faded orange jumpsuit, his hands now shackled to a steel ring bolted into the wood. Across from him, defense attorney Laura Chen laid out her own stack of papers. She had the sharp, measured calm of someone used to walking into burning buildings and speaking as if everything were under control. She flipped through the evidence summaries, the lab reports, the inventory lists, her eyes moving fast. When she finally looked up, the first thing she said wasn't about innocence or guilt. It was about survival. They don't have a body, she said flatly. That matters. A lot. They have circumstantial evidence, time gaps, and degraded samples from 20 years ago. That matters too. But if you lie to me about anything, even something that feels small, none of that will save you. Her gaze pinned him in place. So let's start with the trunk. Why keep her bracelet? Why not throw it away the second you found it? He hesitated, mouth working as if the words were caught on the way out. I told them, he said quietly. I thought she might come by for it. Then after she didn't, it felt wrong to toss it like trash. He stared at his cuffed wrists. And after a while, it was just there. Part of the box. He took a breath. I didn't hurt her, Laura. I didn't. Chen didn't rush to reassure him. She'd heard that sentence in too many voices to let it sway her anymore. The DNA on the bracelet, she continued, tapping the report, is consistent with blood from a medical clinic record. That can be explained. You cut yourself, you bleed, you touch your own jewelry. Not damning by itself. But the state will argue it shows violence. They'll show the broken clasp to the jury and ask them to fill in the blanks. She slid another page across. This is worse. Your DNA on fabric from the canal area where they think she was taken. That's no longer just in the neighborhood, Brian. That's in the path of disposal. He blinked slowly, as if hearing the words in another language. I fished there, he finally murmured. Everyone did. I smoked there. Through butts. Are they saying every trace of me near water means I killed someone? Chen scribbled a note, but didn't answer. In court, everything meant something. That was the danger. At the prosecutor's office downtown, Assistant State Attorney Daniel Holloway walked a tightrope of his own. He knew what the cameras wanted. A clean narrative, a villain in cuffs, a triumphant press conference. He also knew what an appellate court would do to him if he built a case on emotion instead of evidence. On his whiteboard, the timeline took up an entire wall. At 7:30 p.m. on the night Amber vanished, she arrived home from a friend's house. At 8:15, a neighbor saw her light on. At 9:30, Karen checked in on her, found her reading. At 9:47, the panicked 911 call. Somewhere in those 77 minutes, the unthinkable happened. Holloway paced in front of the board, marker in hand. We've got him near the canal that week from a neighbor's statement, he said to Green and the team. We've got his DNA on fabric from that area. We've got physical possession of her bracelet in his locked trunk. Prior proximity. Trusted access to the house. Opportunity every day for months. It's not flawless, but it's coherent. He pointed the marker at a gap between lines on the board. What we don't have is a cause of death. We don't have a weapon. We don't have a body to point to and say, this is what he did to her. A jury will feel that absence, even if they can't name it. Green folded her arms, eyes on the dates. We're not staging a TV finale, she said. We're putting a man on trial for the rest of his life. If we're wrong, she trailed off, the rest of the sentence implied. If we're wrong, the monster is still out there. If we're right, we're sending a neighbor to die in prison. There was no version of this story that came out clean. To tighten the gaps, they went backwards. Back to 2003, back to dial-up internet and flip phones, back to the old Delaney house. The current owners let the detectives in with awkward politeness, standing aside as strangers mapped their home in tape measures and photographs. The floor plan was the same. Amber's old room, now painted a different color, a different bed pressed against a wall where hers had been. They reconstructed that night in careful, clinical steps, where the mother had stood when she called out good night. How far her voice carried down the hallway. How quickly someone could cross the yard from Keller's house to the Delaney's without being seen. The timing felt tight. Not impossible, but tight. Digital forensics reopened another door. In a storage facility, officers unearthed the box that held Amber's old computer tower and a scuffed flip phone sealed in plastic. Both had once been cutting edge. Now they looked like props from a period piece. State techs carefully transferred the hard drive to a clean system, hunting for data ghosts that hadn't quite faded. Old emails, cached web pages, chat logs from long-dead messenger services surfaced in fragments. Screen names instead of real ones. Ocean Eyes. Suncoast 88. Blue Harbor. Some conversations were innocent. Homework, music, teenage complaints about parents. One stood out. The tone was different. More intense. Flattering. Persuasive. Blue Harbor told her she seemed more mature than other girls. Told her he understood what it was like to feel invisible. Suggested meeting, somewhere quiet, where they could talk without anyone breathing down your neck. There were no explicit threats, no direct mentions of sex. Just a steady drip of emotional grooming. The trace metadata put the IP address somewhere in Palmetto Bay. Not precise enough for an exact house, but limited enough to put the sender in the same town, on the same grid of streets. Holloway stared at the printout. "Can we tie this to Keller?" he asked. The tech shook his head. Not directly. IP ranges back then were broader. Could be any of the houses on that block. Could be a coffee shop if they had Wi-Fi, which most didn't. Could be someone on a stolen connection. We'd need old ISP logs, and those are long gone. Best I can say is, local user, general area. It was enough to darken the picture, not enough to define it. Did Blue Harbor walk past Amber's window every day? Had he watched her through blinds, fingers on a keyboard 2 rooms away? Or was he someone else entirely? Someone who'd never set foot on her street, but had still reached into her life through a glowing screen? The case files sprouted branches where there had once been single lines. Raines visited Keller's old job site next. A small marine supply store near the docks where locals bought rope, bait, and parts for their boats. The place smelled of rubber and salt and stale coffee. The owner, grizzled and weary, remembered Keller immediately. Quiet guy, he said. Did his work. Didn't cause trouble. Took smoke breaks out back. Sometimes stayed late to do inventory. He paused. Weird thing though. Couple years before that girl went missing, there was talk about another one. Not here. Different town. St. Augustine, maybe. Dinger, Vanitz. Folks around here were spooked. Brian didn't say much about it, but he listened. Really listened. The owner's eyes went distant. That's what I remember. How much attention he paid. Public records filled in the geography. Keller had lived in St. Augustine in the late 90s. Right around the time a 16-year-old named Maddie Klein disappeared walking home from a part-time job. No body. No arrest. No closure. Another unsolved file tucked into another dusty cabinet. The details echoed. Small coastal town. Quiet neighborhood. Missing girl. Sudden void. The similarities were enough to make Holloway's pulse quicken. They were also enough to make any defense attorney's mouth water. When Chun got wind of Maddie Klein, she immediately positioned it as proof of the state's desperation. They're going to try to turn you into a boogeyman, she told Keller in the visiting room, her voice calm but clipped. Every unsolved case within 100 miles will suddenly be connected. Jurors eat that up. It makes the world make sense. Oh, there's a pattern. He's always been a monster. But pattern isn't proof. You understand that? Keller nodded slowly, though his eyes had gone somewhere far away. I didn't know that girl, he murmured. I heard people talk, sure. You couldn't not hear it. But I didn't touch her. I didn't touch Amber. His voice cracked on the last name just enough for doubt to slide through. On the other side of town, in a cramped apartment cluttered with old yearbooks and shoe boxes of photos, Lena Ortiz pulled out a worn spiral notebook. She'd been Amber's closest friend in 2003, the one who spent almost every afternoon in her room, sharing secrets and snacks and homework. She'd left Palmetto Bay years ago, but when the story broke, the detectives found her through social media. Now she sat across from Raines and Green, hands shaking as she flipped through pages of teenage handwriting. I wrote everything back then, she said with a nervous laugh. Crushes, fights with my mom, stupid song lyrics. And sometimes stuff with Amber. Things she said. She stopped on a page where Amber's name appeared in curly letters. Here, in blue ink, a note from 20 years earlier, September 12th. A. Said she feels like someone's watching her when she walks home. Blue car. Same spot near the canal. Didn't want to tell her mom. Didn't want to make drama. Rains felt his chest tighten. Did she ever say who she thought it was? He asked. Lena shook her head. No. That's the thing. She made jokes about creepy eyes, but never a name. I asked, but she'd change the subject, or say she was just being paranoid. She closed the notebook gently, as if it were fragile. She trusted people too much. Teachers, coaches, neighbors. Adults were safe in her head. That's how we were taught. The note shifted the picture again. The blue car near the canal. The feeling of being watched. It could have been Keller's vehicle, or someone else's entirely. It could have been a shadow she'd projected onto an ordinary commuter. Or it could have been the only warning she ever allowed herself to say out loud. 20 years later, the distinction mattered more than ever, and was harder than ever to prove. That evening, as the sun slid low over the mangroves and turned the sky a bruised orange, Rains drove back to the old street. He parked at the far end and walked slowly, hands in his pockets, past the Delaney house, past Keller's, past the Harrow's fluttering curtains. He stopped at the corner where the road bent toward the canal. A faint breeze carried the smell of water and cut grass. In his mind, he rewound the night to 2003, pressing play on that invisible tape again. Amber in her room, reading. A blue car idling near the canal. A neighbor glancing at a clock. Somewhere in that narrow window, someone made a choice that had been echoing for 2 decades. He checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. The exact time of the 911 call all those years ago. The street lay in front of him, still and quiet, bathed in the yellow pools of the same tired streetlights. Porch lamps glowed on timers. A dog barked once, twice, then stopped. To anyone driving by, it looked ordinary. Safe. Predictable. But as Rains stood there, the weight of the notebook entry, the chat logs, the DNA, the bracelet, the missing body all pressed around him like the thick Florida air. The case, everyone said, was solved. The headline said so. The arrest said so. The town wanted it to be so. Yet as he watched the shadows pool at the bend in the road, he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in this quiet scene, something essential was still missing. Something small, almost invisible, that refused to surface and refused to let the past stay buried. The next morning, the rain finally came. A steady, soaking sheet that turned the streets slick and blurred the yellow tape in front of Keller's house into streaks of color. Palmetto Bay looked like it was being washed, but nothing important came off. The cameras stayed. The microphones stayed. The whispering stayed. At the station, the phones lit up in waves as the re-aired segment on Amber's case ricocheted around the state. 20 years after the first search parties, there was a new phenomenon to contend with. Armchair detectives, internet forums, strangers on the other side of the country, convinced they knew what really happened to a girl they'd never met. Tips poured in, just like before. A woman in Tampa swore she'd gone to high school with Keller and always thought he was odd, even though he'd never left Palmetto Bay back then. A caller from Georgia claimed to have seen Amber at a rest stop years ago. Older, but definitely her. A man who refused to give his name said the real suspect was a trucker who passed through town that week. Because that's how these things always go. The detectives logged each one, assigned numbers, checked what could be checked. Most fell apart the second someone pushed on them. A few clung stubbornly to the edge of possibility. One stood out. An email, not a call. Sent from a throwaway account, no name attached. The subject line was 3 words. Blue car, canal. The body was short. I saw him more than once back then. Man in a blue sedan at the bend, lights off. Thought he was just smoking. Saw him again the week the girl went missing. I told someone. They told me not to get involved. Thought you should know you missed things the first time. Green read it twice, then slid it across to Rains. You remember anything like this? She asked. He shook his head slowly. We had a note about a dark car, he said. But nothing this specific. No one with the guts to say they'd been ignored. He flipped through the old logs again that night, fingers brushing the torn edge where a patrol officer's page had once been. It was still missing. Still a hole. The anonymous email traced back to a public library computer 3 towns over. Access logs wiped long ago. Dead end. But it added weight to Lena's notebook entry. A blue car. The canal. The sense of being watched. The shape of something circling the story that wasn't quite ready to show its face. Online, the story twisted and grew extra limbs. True crime channels dissected Keller's past, his social media, the layout of his street. Comment sections turned into mock juries. Some users dug up property records and old yearbook photos. Others focused on the chat logs with Blue Harbor, spinning theories about digital predators and catfishing long before the term was popular. A few insisted that the police had latched onto the family friend because it's easier than admitting they blew it 2 decades ago. Everyone had an angle. Almost no one had actual evidence. In a conference room with blinds half closed against the grey light, Chun pinned printed screenshots to a corkboard. J'ai accept. ISP reports. Transcripts of the 2003 tip about a dark sedan. A copy of the email about the blue car. She drew lines between them with red string, not because she believed in the cliché, but because it helped juries see what she needed them to see. Uncertainty, alternative paths, shadows where the state claimed clarity. When we go to trial, she told Keller, who sat opposite her in shackles, they're going to present you as the only story that ever made sense. I'm going to present you as one of several stories that could be true. My job isn't to prove what really happened. It's to show that they can't. You understand the difference? He nodded, though his eyes looked hollow. You think someone else could have done it, he said, voice rough. It sounded halfway between hope and accusation. I think, she replied carefully, that there are pieces that don't sit neatly in their box. The chat user. The blue car. The fact that they can't tie that online account directly to your machines. The fact that there was another missing girl in a different town, and they're dying to staple her to your name without hard proof. Juries don't like messy. But messy is all we have here. In the lab, Ortega had been thinking about messy too. The more she dug, the more the case resisted simple patterns. Late one evening, long after most of the building had gone dark, she turned her attention to a small evidence envelope from 2003 that had sat untouched in cold storage for years. It contained a cigarette butt. The label in faded ink read, "Outside Delaney bedroom window, September 3rd. Back then, it hadn't gone anywhere. No DNA hit, no match, just another piece of debris from a night that was rapidly filling with it. Now, under the fluorescence of her station lamp, it looked different. Not in appearance, it was still a flattened, stained stub, but in potential. Ortega cut the filter, extracted what little organic material had survived, coaxed out a degraded profile. The first run came back partial. The second filled in more blanks. When she compared it to Keller's known sample, the answer flashed in a simple, unemotional word: excluded. The cigarette smoked under Amber's window that night had not belonged to the man now sitting in a cell accused of killing her. Ortega sat back, the chair creaking in the quiet. An exclusion didn't exonerate. People borrowed cigarettes. People picked them up and relit them. But in a case built on proximity and inference, on the idea that the faint smell of smoke near a closed window might have been the suspect, this small, stubborn fact drew a hard line through one part of the story. She reported it that night. Green took the call, jaw tightening as she listened. Document everything, the chief said. Chain of custody, methods, margins of error. If the defense finds this first, they'll drive a truck through it. If we present it, we do it in a way that shows we're not afraid of what doesn't fit. Holloway was less measured. He stared at the report like it was a bad joke. So the one physical trace we had that connected a person to her window isn't him, he said. Great. Perfect. He dropped the paper on his desk. Unless we find whose DNA this is, it's just a ghost. It doesn't help us. It just tells the jury there was someone else outside that room we never caught. Raines didn't say anything at first. He took the report, read it again, then went to stand at the bulletin board where Amber's photo was pinned. He traced the timeline with his finger. Her room. The smell of smoke. The vanished girl. For 20 years, in his head, those details had leaned toward one conclusion: the neighbor. The man who was always there. The easy, awful explanation. Now the smoke belonged to someone else. Maybe another neighbor. Maybe a stranger. Maybe the same Blue Harbor, from the screen, stepping into the physical world. Or maybe just some kid sneaking a cigarette, where he thought no one would see. He thought of Keller's words in the interrogation room. If you've convinced yourself otherwise, then you're going to miss whoever really did. They sounded different now, edged with something that felt uncomfortably like prophecy. When Chen finally got her hands on the DNA report for the cigarette, she read it twice, then 3 times, then let out a slow breath. This, she said quietly, isn't the magic bullet everyone on the internet thinks it is. But it's not nothing. She turned to Keller. It tells a story, Someone smoked under that window who wasn't you. If I can get a jury to picture that person, to imagine a face that isn't yours, that's reasonable doubt. Doesn't matter if we know their name. Can they find him? Keller asked, leaning forward. The smoker. Can they test it against everyone? She shook her head. There's no universal database. They'll run it against what they have, offenders, known profiles. If the person never got caught for anything that put them in the system, it's just a number. A ghost, like the prosecutor said. She paused. But ghosts make people nervous. Nervous jurors don't rush into life sentences. The Delaney's heard about the cigarette from Green in a small private meeting room at the courthouse. No cameras. No microphones. Just 4 chairs and a table scarred with old scratches. Karen listened without moving, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles went white. So there was someone else outside that room, she said when Green finished. Someone you never found. Someone you still can't name. Green nodded once. Yes, but it doesn't erase the evidence we do have connecting Keller to Amber. The bracelet. The fabric. His access. We're not walking away from this, Karen. We're telling you because you deserve to know everything. Even the parts that complicate the picture. For a long moment, Karen stared at a tiny gouge in the tabletop. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd had all this back then? She asked softly. The DNA. The computers. The phones. Would she still be missing? Would we still be sitting here, wondering who stood under her window? Rains, sitting beside Green, found himself answering before he'd fully formed the thought. I think, he said, we would have had more pieces. But that doesn't mean they would have fallen into place any easier. Sometimes all technology does is show us more ways we might have failed. She looked up at him, eyes sharp. You didn't fail, she said. The person who took her did. Don't take that away from them. The words landed like a slap and a mercy at the same time. Back on Amber's old street, the blue car story refused to die. Reporters dug into DMV records from 2003, looking for registered vehicles matching the description near the canal. They found dozens across the county, a handful within a few miles of the Delaney house. One belonged to a man who'd moved away the year after she disappeared. Another to a woman who'd sold hers and couldn't recall who bought it next. Every door they knocked on added more fog instead of light. One name surfaced more than once. Evan Mallory, then 22, who'd lived in a small rental a few blocks from the canal. He'd owned an older blue sedan. Worked nights at a bar. No criminal record back then. Now, a string of arrests in another state for bar fights, a DUI, and more recently, an assault charge involving a girlfriend who later recanted. Nothing that screamed serial predator, but enough to make him prick up the ears of investigators already drowning in doubt. Holloway's team tracked him down, sat him in a different interview room in a different city, slid a photograph of Amber across another table. He frowned, shook his head, said he didn't remember her, didn't even remember much about that year. When they asked if he'd spent time near the canal at night, he shrugged. Everybody did, he said. It's where you went to smoke, drink cheap beer, talk where your parents wouldn't hear. They asked for a DNA swab. He hesitated for half a second, then opened his mouth and let the cotton touch his cheek. Weeks later, the lab report came back. His profile didn't match the cigarette either. Another ghost crossed off. Another path looping back into the dark. As the pretrial hearings approached, the courtroom slowly transformed into a stage. Cameras tested angles, sketch artists claimed corners, deputies rehearsed routes for moving Keller in and out away from shouting crowds. On the steps outside, advocates for cold case victims held signs about justice delayed, not being justice denied. Across from them, a smaller group held signs that read evidence, not emotion, and innocent until proven guilty, some of them wearing shirts with slogans about wrongful convictions. The town wasn't split cleanly down the middle. It was cracked, with fissures running through families, friendships, memories. Inside, under high ceilings and fluorescent light, Rains watched workers align chairs and microphones, and felt the years pressing in. This room, he knew, would not tell him what really happened that night in 2003. It would only decide what version of the story the state was allowed to live with. Amber's last hour on Earth would remain unwritten in any official record, replaced by a verdict, a sentence, a box checked resolved. Somewhere, in a lab freezer, a small piece of cotton with unknown DNA sat waiting, stubborn proof that at least one more pair of lungs had drawn smoke under that window. Somewhere, in the archives of a defunct ISP, long erased logs still held the true identity of Blue Harbor, a ghost hiding behind numbers. The rain tapered off. The streets dried. The town adjusted around the shifted weight of the case like a body around a healed fracture. But as the first jury summons went out, as names were pulled from lists and lives were prepared to pause, one thing remained unchanged, humming beneath everything like power in unseen wires. The sense that for all the evidence, for all the headlines, for all the people who had decided their own version of the truth, something essential about Amber Delaney's story was still out there, just beyond the reach of the light, waiting to be seen or determined to stay hidden forever. The first day of the pretrial hearing dawned bright and merciless, the kind of Florida morning where the sun hits the asphalt and everything shimmers, too hot, too alive for what was about to happen inside. News vans lined the courthouse steps like vultures in chrome. Reporters rehearsed live intros in crisp shirts, powder melting under the heat. The words Florida, 2003 cold case, solved glowed on every screen again, like a looped heartbeat the town couldn't escape. 2 decades of silence were about to be spoken out loud, dissected, recorded, replayed for anyone who cared to watch. Inside, the air was cool and stale, heavy with expectation. The courtroom filled early, locals, former classmates, strangers who'd followed every update online. The Delaney family sat in the second row, Karen clutching a folded tissue that never left her hand. Across the aisle, Keller sat with his wrists chained loosely in front of him, the orange jumpsuit replaced by a cheap grey suit that hung wrong on his frame. His eyes didn't move toward the gallery. They stayed fixed on the wood grain of the defense table, as if he could disappear into it if he stared hard enough. When the judge entered, everyone rose. When they sat, the sound was a wave, fabric, wood breath. Then silence. Chun stood first. Calm. Precise. Your Honor, she began. This case has been reopened after 20 years not because of new witnesses or confessions, but because of technology. Because we can now test what couldn't be tested then. But technology doesn't replace truth. It doesn't remember. It only measures what remains, and sometimes what remains is misleading. Her tone was clean, clipped, surgical. We are not here to relive grief. We are here to determine whether the state can truly connect Brian Keller to the disappearance and presumed death of Amber Delaney, beyond a reasonable doubt. When she sat, Holloway rose. The prosecutor's voice carried like he'd practiced for months. For 20 years, the Delaney family waited for answers. For 20 years, this community lived under a shadow. The evidence we bring forward will show that the person who lived 2 doors away, trusted, welcomed, loved, was the same man who took that trust and used it to lure a child into silence. His eyes moved briefly to Keller. We have his DNA at the scene. We have her blood on a bracelet found in his possession. We have witnesses who will confirm his closeness to the family, his opportunity, his pattern of behavior. He paused. The passage of time may have blurred the edges of memory, but the facts remain sharp. Amber Delaney deserves more than speculation. She deserves the truth. The judge nodded once. The hearing began. The first witness was Ortega, the forensic analyst. Her voice was steady, methodical. She explained the DNA match on the fabric scrap found near the canal. She detailed how advances in technology had allowed them to extract a complete profile, and how that profile matched Keller's with a probability of 1 in 2 billion. The jurors leaned in. Numbers carried weight. They sounded like certainty. Then Chun rose for cross-examination, and the air shifted. You're saying the DNA on that fabric was my client's, she said evenly. But that fabric was recovered from a canal area used by hundreds of people over decades, correct? Yes. And you can't determine when that DNA was deposited? No. So it could have been from 2003. Or 2013. Or last week. In theory, yes. In theory, Chun repeated softly. Because the canal was never secured, never isolated, never treated as an active crime scene. It was an open environment. Ortega Hesetotiz. That's correct. Chun turned to the jury, not dramatically, but with a small, deliberate glance. So what we have, after 20 years, is a probability and a theory. Not a timestamp, not a location of death, not proof of contact. The jurors scribbled notes. Raines watched from the gallery, jaw set. He respected Chen's precision. She cut deep, but she cut honestly. He also hated it. Next came the bracelet. The evidence everyone recognized. The small, silver chain engraved A.D. Holloway held it up with gloved hands, the metal catching the light like something sacred. This was found in a locked trunk in the defendant's garage, he said. The same trunk where he kept personal mementos. The chain was broken. Tests confirmed blood consistent with Amber Delaney's sample. When Chun took over, She didn't attack the science. She attacked the story. You say this was found in a locked trunk, she began. Are there any records showing when that trunk was last opened before the warrant? No, the officer said. Any indication who else might have had access to that garage? Not conclusively. And the blood sample, 20 years old, could it have come from a cut, a nosebleed, anything that produced trace contact? In theory, yes. In theory, Chen echoed again, the phrase becoming a quiet refrain. The same phrase the state used for every gap it can't fill. She turned toward the jury again. You've seen the bracelet. You've seen the photograph. What you haven't seen is evidence of violence. No marks, no wounds, no body. A broken clasp could mean a struggle, or it could mean a loose link. We can't build guilt from maybes. Not after 20 years of silence. Karen Delaney closed her eyes. She'd heard these arguments before, but hearing them in this room made her stomach twist. Loose link. Maybe. The words sounded like ways of unknowing her daughter all over again. When Keller took the stand, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. It was rare, risky, but Chun had decided it was the only way to humanize him against the weight of the evidence. His voice was soft, almost hoarse. I didn't hurt her, he said. I didn't take her. I looked for her. I wanted her found. He told the story again. The bracelet he'd kept. The yard where he claimed to have found it. The quiet nights after she vanished when he'd walk to the canal and stare at the water, thinking maybe she'd run away, maybe she'd come back. Holloway's cross-examination tore at the edges. You expect this jury to believe, he said, that you, a grown man, kept a teenage girl's bracelet for 20 years out of sentimentality? I didn't know what else to do with it, Keller said. Throwing it away felt wrong. You didn't think telling police you had it might be right? I didn't want them to think. That you were guilty? Holloway cut in. Because you knew how it would look? Keller didn't answer. The silence felt like confession. By the second week, the town was addicted. Every new revelation fed into nightly debates. Every whispered theory grew teeth. Local diners replayed the live stream on mounted TVs, forks pausing midair when testimony turned tense. The name Amber Delaney became currency again, on hashtags, in podcasts, in the same breath as words like closure and justice and betrayal. But inside the courthouse, the case was unraveling faster than the public realized. The cigarette, the exclusion, the ghost under the window. Chin introduced it late in the week, like a hidden card. This, she said, holding up the report, is DNA from a cigarette but found directly beneath the victim's bedroom window on the night she vanished. It has been tested with modern methods. It does not match my client. The state cannot tell you whose it is, but it belongs to someone who was there. Someone they never identified. The words landed heavy. Jurors glanced at one another. Rains felt his pulse spike. He knew what this meant. The hole in the story had just become a crater. Holloway tried to spin it. One cigarette doesn't erase 20 years of evidence, he said in rebuttal. It could have been anyone passing by. A neighbor. A jogger. A stranger cutting through. The defendant's DNA, however, is where it should not be, on evidence linked to a missing child. The rest is noise. But even as he said it, his voice lacked conviction. The seed was planted. After court, the Delaneys walked out through a side door to avoid cameras. Karen stopped halfway to the car, eyes unfocused. What if it's someone else? She whispered. Mark didn't answer. The question hung in the humid air like thunder. That night, Rains couldn't sleep. He drove the same route again, past the courthouse, down Main, through the old neighborhood. The windows of the Delaney house glowed faintly. Someone new lived there now. Kids' bikes leaned on the fence. Ordinary life had grown back over the scar. He parked by the canal and sat in silence. The headlights made the water shimmer. Somewhere nearby, frogs croaked, oblivious. He thought of the cigarette, the anonymous email, the chat logs. He thought of all the faces in his files, neighbors, classmates, passers-by, and how many of them had moved, changed names, disappeared into the ordinary tide of years. His phone buzzed. A text from Green. You should see this. New lab result just came in. He turned the car around and drove back, headlights carving through the dark. At the station, Green handed him a folder. They reran the cigarette sample against the expanded database, she said. We didn't have this database 6 months ago. It includes military entries now. Rains flipped the page. The name printed on the match line made his stomach twist. Evan Mallory. The same man they'd questioned. The same man who'd given his DNA voluntarily weeks earlier. The sample from his cheek hadn't matched before, because the old cigarette extraction had been partial. Now, with deeper sequencing, the profile had filled in. The system connected them instantly. The ghost under the window finally had a name. Green's voice was calm. He wasn't lying when he said he used to hang around the canal. But he didn't tell us he was near the Delaney house that night. Rains exhaled slowly. He didn't think we'd ever find out. The next morning, detectives went back to Mallory's apartment with a new warrant. They found nothing dramatic. No trophies, no photos, no confession written in ink. But they found a box of old CDs, early 2000s labels, Mix 1, Mix 2 summer songs. One, cracked and unmarked, contained image files. Most were blurry photos of beaches, streets, random people. A few were sharper. One showed a girl sitting on a bench, sunlight on her hair. Amber Delaney. The timestamp, 2 days before she vanished. The camera angle was low, distant, like someone shooting from a car window. When Holloway saw the photos, his voice went flat. Where did we go wrong? Rains didn't answer. Because there wasn't a clean answer. Maybe Keller was guilty. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe both men had circled the same girl for different reasons, and only one of them crossed the final line. The evidence couldn't tell the difference anymore. Too much time had passed. Too many files lost, too many memories rewired. The next headline hit before the day was over. New suspect emerges in Florida cold case. Cigarette DNA linked to second man. The town erupted again. Some said this proved Keller's innocence. Others said it proved he hadn't acted alone. The Delaneys didn't speak publicly. They watched the noise from behind closed doors, the way people watch a storm they can't stop. And that night, as thunder rolled once more over the bay, Detective Rains stood at the window of his small apartment and watched the rain smear the lights outside. 2 decades of searching, and the story still had no ending. Only layers. Only ghosts trading places in the dark. Amber's face, framed in a grainy photo on his wall, seemed to look through him. He whispered the same question he'd been asking since the night she vanished, the one no verdict, no lab result, no press conference could answer. What really happened to you? They brought Evan Mallory into the same interview room they'd used for Keller, as if the walls themselves were learning all the ways a story could twist. He walked in jeans and a faded t-shirt, hands cuffed in front, hair a little too long, jaw rough with stubble. No jumpsuit, not yet. His eyes swept the room once, quick, assessing, then landed on the photo on the table. Amber on the bench, sunlight on her hair, frozen mid-laugh. He flinched so fast most people would have missed it. Rains didn't. Green sat beside him, file closed, voice calm. You told us you didn't remember her, she said. Didn't remember much about that year. But you took this picture. She slid the printout across the table. Explain that. Mallory stared at the photo, lips pressed into a line. For a second, something like shame crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by practiced confusion. I took pictures of everyone back then, he said. Street stuff. People on benches. Candid shots. I don't remember every face. Rains leaned forward, elbows on the table. You're a candid street photographer now? He asked. Is that what we're going with? Mallory's jaw tightened. It was a hobby. I had a cheap camera, a lot of time. I liked catching moments. Rains tapped the timestamp at the bottom of the image. 2 days before she disappeared, he said. You caught a moment of a 15-year-old girl 2 blocks from where you lived. And the same girl vanished 48 hours later. That's not just a moment, Evan. That's a pattern. Mallory looked up at him, eyes dark. If you think I did something to her, he said slowly, charge me. Don't play around with art critique. The anger in his voice was real. But anger didn't clear anyone. Rains ignored it. We also found your DNA on a cigarette beneath her bedroom window, he went on. Same night she vanished. You said you hung out by the canal, like everyone. You never mentioned standing under a missing girl's window. I smoked everywhere, Mallory snapped. You remember every spot you stood 20 years ago, every cigarette you had. Rains let the question hang, unanswered. Why didn't you come forward when she disappeared? He asked instead. If you knew her face, if you remembered taking this picture, why not tell someone? Why not say, I saw her at the park, I was near that house. Mallory's stare dropped back to the print. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. Because I knew how it would look, he said. You're proving me right. On the other side of the glass, Holloway watched, arms folded. The case he'd been building around Keller was cracking. Not cleanly, but in jagged splinters that cut every argument he'd planned. Another man. Another story. Another set of maybes. The task now wasn't just proving something. It was deciding which uncertainty a jury would be forced to live with. Behind bars, Keller heard about Mallory from a guarded whisper and a flickering TV mounted in the pod. New suspect. DNA match. Cigarette. His own face, which had dominated the news cycle, now shared with another. Two ghosts, side by side on the screen. For a moment, he felt an electric jolt of relief. Then something heavier settled in. This didn't erase anything. It just meant he wasn't the only one under the microscope anymore. Chun came to see him that afternoon. She dropped a newspaper on the table between them, the headline cutting across the fold. New DNA link in Florida cold case. Beneath it, 2 photographs. One of him, one of Mallory. They finally found their smoker, she said. Congratulations. You're not the only monster in town. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Does this help me or make it worse? Both, she said. It confirms there was someone else there that night. Someone they didn't catch. That's good for doubt. It also lets the state argue you weren't alone. That's bad for everything else. I wasn't there at all, Keller said quietly. I didn't need a partner to be innocent. Then this is a gift, Chun replied. Try to look like you appreciate it. In the prosecutor's office, the whiteboard got messy. New lines, new names, new question marks. Holloway erased a clean arrow from Amber to Keller and replaced it with a branching fork. Keller, Mallory, unknown. It looked less like a case and more like a storm map. They're going to say we rushed to charge Keller, Green warned. That we hung the headline on the first man we could find, then tripped over evidence that someone else was there. Did we rush? Holloway asked, not looking away from the board. Green thought of the bracelet, the fabric, the boxes in Keller's garage. We followed the evidence we had, she said. Now we have more. It doesn't erase the first trail. It just means the story never had one track. Ortega arrived with another folder. Her face made Rain's stomach sink before she even spoke. We pulled old metadata from the CD, she said. The one with the photos. We cross-referenced timestamps, locations. Mallory's picture of Amber at the park. The angle suggests he was in a car parked at the curb. Based on the shadow lines, he was there at least several minutes, waiting. Not a drive-by shot. More like he watched until he liked the frame. So he was stalking her, Holloway said. It wasn't a question. It suggests fixation, Ortega replied. I can't tell you what was in his head. The pixels only know light and dark. They dug into Mallory's past. Old co-workers described him as moody, restless, drinking too much. An ex-girlfriend from those years remembered a habit of watching people from his car, engine idling, music off. He said he liked studying them, she told the detectives over a choppy video call. Said everyone showed their real face when they thought they were alone. She frowned. It creeps me out now, thinking about it. Back then I thought he was just artsy. Intense. Public records filled in more. Mallory had been cited once for trespassing near a school after hours. The charge was dropped. A neighbor had complained about him sitting in his car outside her house late at night. Nothing came of it. Each incident small on its own, forgettable. Together, they painted a man who liked the edges of places. The spaces where people thought they weren't being watched. Online, theories multiplied. Some now insisted Mallory was the real culprit. Some doubled down. Keller and Mallory together, an unholy duo. Others walked away altogether, exhausted by the shifting narrative. The only constants were Amber's face, and the word cold grafted to the case like ice that wouldn't melt. The judge ordered a recess in the pretrial hearings, while both sides reviewed the new evidence. The courthouse exhaled, then inhaled again in gossip and speculation. In the quiet that followed, Rains sat alone at his kitchen table with the files spread out around him like a crime scene in miniature. 2 men. 1 missing girl. DNA, chat logs, a cigarette, a bracelet, a photograph. And somewhere between all of that, a single night no one could drag into full light. He flipped back to the online chats. Blue Harbor. The flattering messages. The coaxing tone. The suggestion to meet somewhere quiet. He circled the phrase. Quiet. Secluded. Close. He thought of the canal, the park bench, the bend in the road. One question gnawed. Who was on the other end of that screen? A neighbor in a house 2 doors down, typing through a stolen signal? A young man in a rental a few blocks over, car idling, fingers moving over a cheap keyboard? Or someone else entirely? Someone whose name wasn't even in these files? Digital forensics tried to push further. An aging laptop recovered from Mallory's storage unit coughed up fragments of old hard drive data. Deleted folders, half-corrupted messaging logs, stray cache files. Some matched the timelines of the Blue Harbor chats. Not a direct fingerprint, but smudges in the right place. Enough to suggest he could have been the one behind the screen. We can't say definitively he was Blue Harbor, the lead tech cautioned. But if I had to assign probability? High. Very high. Chun saw the same report and smiled without warmth. High probability, she said, tapping the phrase. They love that. Juries love that. But probability isn't identity. Could be isn't is. If they try to pivot to Mallory as the online predator, it doesn't clear you. It just makes the story murkier. I can work with murky. They can't. So what happens to me? Keller asked. If they think it's him now? They still have your DNA at the canal and Amber's bracelet in your trunk, Chun said bluntly. They're not dropping this. The question is whether they stand in front of a jury and say, trust us, he did it. While pointing at you, or while pointing at both of you, or, she exhaled. They back away entirely and call it unsolved again. I don't think they're ready for that. Karen Delaney watched the newscast alone that night. The anchor's voice rolled through the hotel room. New evidence links a second man to the scene of a 2003 disappearance in Palmetto Bay, raising fresh questions about a case many believed was finally solved. She muted the sound and watched the images instead. Keller in chains. Mallory in a still frame from a driver's license photo. Amber in grainy home video, spinning in a backyard sprinkler, water catching the sun like glass. Mark knocked softly on the bathroom door. You okay? He asked. Do you think they'll ever stop changing their minds? She asked through the wood. He didn't have an answer. The question wasn't really for him. The next time Mallory came in, the tone had shifted. He was no longer a person of interest. He was a suspect. Not formally charged yet. But the weight in the room was different. Green's questions sharpened. Rain's patience thinned. Were you Blue Harbor? Green asked. Mallory rubbed his wrists where the cuffs had chafed. I don't remember every username I've ever used, he said. It was 20 years ago. I went by a lot of stupid things back then. Did you tell a 15-year-old girl she was more mature than other girls? Rains pressed. Did you ask her to meet you somewhere quiet? Mallory's eyes flickered, just for a second. Shame again? Fear? Memory? If I talked to someone, he said. It was just talk. Online talk. Everybody did it. Everyone pretended to be someone else. That doesn't make me a kidnapper. Someone pretended to be safe, Rains said, voice low. And she disappeared. Mallory leaned back, the chair creaking. Charge me, he repeated. Or stop using her like a mirror for your guilt. It was a direct hit. Rains' jaw clenched. He wanted to slam his hand on the table. Instead, he closed his notebook and stood. We're done for now, he said. But they weren't. Not even close. Days slipped into weeks. For every question answered, 2 more appeared. The state's narrative shifted like sand. First it was Keller, alone. Then Keller, with ghost accomplices. Then Keller, with Mallory shadowing the edges. The defense turned each adjustment into proof of doubt. If they don't know what story they're telling, Chun said to anyone who would listen, how can they ask you to sign off on the ending? In whispered side conversations, a different possibility surfaced. A plea. Not to murder, no body, no cause of death, too risky, but to something lesser. Evidence tampering. Unlawful disposal. An admission that Keller knew more than he'd ever said, without forcing a jury to pick which man's shadow fit the darkness best. Holloway brought the idea to Green in her office. We get him to admit he moved her, he said. That he helped conceal her. That's a form of justice. It gives the family something. We keep looking at Mallory for the rest. And if he didn't? Green asked quietly. If he had nothing to do with it beyond proximity and bad judgment, we lock him into a lie to make ourselves feel better. He kept her bracelet, Holloway countered. In a trunk. For 20 years. Green's answer was soft. Grief makes people keep things too, she said. Memorials, altars, shrines. We've seen that. Silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. Outside, the Florida sky shifted from white-hot to bruised purple as another storm rolled in. On the old street by the canal, the water darkened, small ripples tapping the banks in a restless rhythm. A kid on a bike rode past the Delaney house without slowing, earbuds in, eyes on his phone. He wasn't born when Amber vanished. To him, it was history. To the people who'd stood in that yard with flashlights in 2003, it was still present tense. In his apartment, surrounded by files, Rains stared at the headline on his screen. Family friend charged after new evidence. It had felt so definitive when it first appeared. Clean. Strong. Past tense solved. Now it looked like a question mark, pretending to be a period. He closed the laptop and walked to the wall where Amber's photo hung. He straightened the frame, a pointless habit. "We might put someone away," he said into the quiet room. "We might even put the right someone away. And still not know who stood under that window, who you thought you were going to see when you looked out." The rain started, pattering against the glass in soft, insistent taps. Somewhere, miles away, in a storage unit or a forgotten box or an old hard drive, more fragments of that night sat untouched. A deleted message that hadn't quite vanished. A receipt with a timestamp. A snapshot no one had printed. Pieces of a puzzle everyone insisted was solved now, even as they kept discovering new edges. In the weeks to come, the court would reconvene. Lawyers would refine their stories. Deals would be floated, rejected, reconsidered. The media would adjust its narrative, because Florida 2003 cold case sold fewer clicks than cold case twist. Second man linked to scene. But under all of that, under the noise and the numbers, one fact refused to change, immovable and simple. Amber Delaney had left her room one September night and never come back. And no matter how many names they added to the files, no matter how many headlines declared victory, the question at the heart of Palmetto Bay's longest shadow stayed the same. Not who they could convict, not who they could prove was there, who reached through that window, who spoke the last words she heard, who walked with her into the dark and left her there, invisible, while the town built stories around the absence she left behind. By the time the trial date arrived, the headline that had once sounded like an ending had become a question whispered under every breath. Florida 2003 cold case solved. The words now carried an invisible asterisk, an unwritten maybe, that everyone felt but no one printed. The courthouse steps filled again, but the mood had changed. Less triumph, more tension. People didn't come to see justice wrap up. They came to see whether it would unravel. Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than it had during the hearings. The same high ceiling, the same pale walls, the same polished wood. But now the jury box was full. 12 strangers and 2 alternates, selected from a pool that had already been picked clean of anyone who'd spent the last few months glued to the coverage. Still, they had eyes. They had televisions. Some had walked those search lines 20 years earlier. Some had been children when Amber's face first appeared on flyers taped to their school doors. They promised impartiality and meant it as much as anyone could. But in this town, no one was truly neutral. Keller sat at the defense table in his ill-fitting suit, hair trimmed, shoulders square. His lawyer had told him to look calm, not defeated, cooperative, not broken. Across the room, at a separate table reserved for potential future proceedings, Mallory sat with his own attorney, present but not yet on trial, a shadow in jeans and a collared shirt, watching like everyone else. 2 men, one empty chair where the victim would never sit. The judge reviewed the charges, voice steady, second-degree murder, evidence tampering, abuse of a corpse, no conspiracy count, not yet. Mallory's name appeared nowhere in the indictment, just in the unspoken spaces between sentences. This was still nominally the state versus Brian Keller. The rest of the story waited its turn. Holloway rose for his opening statement, the weight of 2 decades pressing against his lungs. On a September night in 2003, he began, a girl vanished from her bedroom in Palmetto Bay. Her name was Amber Delaney. She was 15, and she never came home. He walked slowly in front of the jury box, not pacing, just moving enough to keep their eyes locked on him. For 20 years, her parents had no answers. For 20 years, this community lived with questions. We are here because advances in science and the persistence of investigators have finally revealed the truth. The person who took Amber from that room was not a stranger. It was someone she trusted, someone who lived 2 doors down. The defendant, Brian Keller. He outlined the bracelet, the fabric with Keller's DNA, the years of closeness. He painted a picture, not cinematic, not flashy, but methodical, of opportunity twisted into violence. He mentioned the cigarette once, briefly, then stepped back. "You will hear about others who might have been near that house," he said. "You will hear about anonymous usernames and dark cars. The defense will point to every shadow and ask you to stare into it. But at the end of this trial, after you've heard all the evidence, the path will lead back to one man. The man sitting right there." When he sat, Chen stood. She didn't stride. She stepped, precise and measured. "When you walked in here," she said to the jury, "you walked into a story that people have been telling for 20 years. A story about fear, about loss, about a girl whose face has become a symbol. You are not here to decide whether her story is tragic. It is. You are not here to decide whether the police should have done more. They should have. You are here to answer a much narrower question. Has the state proven that Brian Keller committed this crime beyond a reasonable doubt? She pointed loosely toward the evidence table. They will show you a bracelet that could have gotten its blood in 100 different mundane ways. They will show you DNA on a piece of fabric from an open canal used by half the town, with no way to know when it got there. They will not show you a body. They will not show you a weapon. They will not show you a cause of death. And they will not explain why a cigarette found beneath Amber's window that night, smoked by a man they did not charge, should not make you stop and ask, what else did they miss? Her eyes shifted, just slightly, in Mallory's direction. Enough for the jury to follow. Reasonable doubt is not about numbers on a screen, she said. It's about whether there is room, real room, for another truth. In this case, there is more than room. There is a chasm. The testimony began. Lena Ortiz took the stand, older now, but still with the quick nervous laugh she'd had as a teenager. She described Amber as kind of sunshine, but stubborn. She described the notebook entry, the blue car by the canal, the feeling of being watched. She joked about it, Lena said, voice shaking slightly. About having a fan. But you could tell it rattled her. She didn't want to tell her mom. She always worried about causing trouble. Holloway asked if Amber had ever mentioned Keller in a way that felt wrong. Lena shook her head. No, she said. He was just there. Like furniture. Someone's dad friend. The guy with the lawnmower. We never thought about him like that. It was meant to show access, familiarity. Under cross, Chen turned it on its head. So if she had been uncomfortable with him, Chen asked gently, you think she would have told you? Yes, Lena said. We told each other everything. And she didn't, Chen pressed. She talked about a car. About a feeling of being watched. Not about her neighbor. No, Lena said again softer. Not about him. It was a small crack, but in a case built of small pieces, every fracture mattered. Ortega returned to the stand with more charts and graphs than anyone wanted to see. She explained partial profiles and expanded databases and probability ratios. She described how the cigarette sample, once too degraded to identify, had been reanalyzed and matched to Mallory. She chose her words carefully, knowing each one would be dissected. Yes, she said under Holloway's questioning. The cigarette under the window belonged to Mr. Mallory. Yes, that means he was there. No, that does not tell us what he was doing. It does not tell us whether he went inside. It does not tell us whether he ever saw Amber that night. Under Chen's cross, the emphasis shifted. You can say with scientific certainty, Chen asked, that the man who smoked under that window was not my client. Yes, Ortega said. I can say that. And you can say with equal certainty that the man who did smoke there has not been charged in this case. Ortega hesitated, glancing at the judge. That is correct. The words buzzed in the air like a neon sign flickering on and refusing to go dark. Outside the courthouse, the story mutated again. New revelation. DNA under window wasn't defendants. Talk radio hosts ranted about police tunnel vision. Commenters online accused the state of scapegoating. Others accused the defense of muddying the waters to let a predator walk. The town's anger, once unified and aimed into the void of unsolved grief, now split into jagged pieces, cutting in every direction. At night, in the strained quiet of the hotel room, Karen and Mark watched the recaps with the sound off. Watching other people talk about their daughter had become a ritual of self-harm they couldn't quite stop. It feels like they're arguing over pieces of her, Mark said once, voice flat. Like if they rearrange the fragments enough, the shape will change. Karen didn't answer. She stared at the image of the courtroom, the shot of Keller at the defense table, the quick cut to Mallory in the back row. Two men orbiting the empty center where her daughter's life used to be. Do you ever think, she said finally, that maybe both of them had a piece of this? That maybe Amber was walking toward one and ended up with the other? The thought scared her more than any singular monster ever had. You could lock up one. How do you lock up a sequence of accidents and choices? Back in Palmetto Bay, the older residents flinched at the sound of sirens. Not because of the crime rate, it was still low, but because the trial had dredged up every dormant anxiety from that long-ago fall. Parents who had been teenagers in 2003 now had kids of their own and found themselves checking windows twice, 3 times at night. Porch lights stayed on longer. Strangers got longer stares. In the middle of all this, another witness stepped forward, dragged from the margins by a name in an old report. Retired Patrol Officer Daniel Price took the stand with a limp and a stare that never quite met the jury's eyes. He'd been the one on duty the night Amber disappeared. His notes from that shift were incomplete. A page, everyone now knew, was missing. Under oath, he explained. We got a call around 10, he said, voice low, thick with years. Disturbance near the canal. Shouting. Maybe a fight. I drove out, didn't see anything when I pulled up. Couple of kids scattered when they saw the cruiser. I wrote it off as teenagers. Logged it. Then the missing person call came in less than an hour later, and everything changed. Holloway's expression hardened. Where is that log page now, Officer Price? Gone, Price said. I don't know how or when. I didn't take it out. But it's not there. Did you connect the disturbance call to Amber's disappearance at the time? Price swallowed. I thought about it. I mentioned it. But once the big search started, we were chasing leads in every direction. It felt like noise. Chun rose slowly for cross-examination. Noise, she repeated. You were called to a possible fight near the canal less than an hour before a 15-year-old girl vanished. You were on the scene. And it was noise. Price's jaw clenched. Ma'am, you can stand there with 20 years' worth of hindsight and call it whatever you want. That night, it was one more call in a stack. I didn't know what I was looking at. Did you get out of the car? She asked. He hesitated. Very slightly. No, he admitted. I rolled through. Looked. No one visible. I moved on. The courtroom seemed to tilt. A juror in the front row shifted, pen stilled. Rains felt his hands tighten around the back of the bench in front of him. He remembered the original incident report, the vague line about possible disturbance. He remembered thinking someone must have checked it out. Walked the banks. Shined a flashlight into the reeds. Now he knew no one had. You never walked to the water, Chun said softly. You never checked the banks. You never called it in as potentially related when the missing person alert went out. His shoulders sagged. No, he said. I didn't. There it was. Not a smoking gun. A smoking absence. A moment where someone could have seen something, the flash of a shirt, a hand, a shoe, had they stepped out of the vehicle. A gap in time that would never be filled. On a break, standing in the hallway with his back against cool plaster, Rains felt the weight of it settle on him like new gravity. They were not just up against time. They were up against their own failures. Not just his, everybody's. The patrol officer who stayed in the car. The detective who didn't push the disturbance call harder. The chief who didn't demand a line-by-line reconstruction before the evidence went cold. We missed things, he murmured to himself. We missed everything. Green joined him, coffee in hand. You look like you've swallowed glass, she said. He admitted it, Rains said. He drove past what might have been the moment. And kept going. We don't know that, Green replied. We know he drove past something. We don't know if Amber was there yet. Or already gone. Or nowhere near it at all. That's the point, Rains said. We don't know. And we're asking a jury to pretend that not knowing is an inconvenience instead of the whole story. In the evenings, after court, Rains started driving out to the canal again. Not the public dock where families fished and took pictures, but the quieter bend near where the disturbance call had been logged. He'd stand with his hands in his pockets and listen to the water slap against the banks, the insects ticking in the weeds. He imagined patrol lights washing over this spot 20 years earlier, imagined shadows freezing, then scattering. Imagined a girl's voice, sharp with fear or anger, snapping. I shouldn't have come. Or let me go. Or, you're not who you said you were. Or maybe nothing. Maybe everything had already gone quiet by then. In the almost dark, with the town's glow behind him and the water breathing slowly in front, he thought about Keller and Mallory, and all the ways both could be guilty and innocent at the same time. Keller with the bracelet, and the access and the neighborhood trust. Mallory with the cigarette, and the telescoped gaze of his camera lens. And Amber, somewhere between them, pulled along by currents they had all helped create. Digital, emotional, physical. The trial moved forward. Witnesses stacked. Experts spoke. Lawyers weaved their parallel tapestries. The jury's faces grew more pale, more lined, more withdrawn. They were no longer simply listening. They were carrying. Every inconsistency, every gap, every new revelation about what hadn't been done more than what had. By the time closing arguments loomed, the image of a solved case had been shattered into glass on the floor. The question was not whether the pieces could be put back together. It was which shape, among all the broken ones, 12 strangers would be asked to live with when they walked out of that room. And outside, just beyond the courthouse steps, the world kept turning. Kids rode bikes. Boats drifted along the bay. The wind moved through the mangroves, whispering the same sound it had made the night Amber disappeared. The town watched its own past on replay and wondered silently whether the truth was something you could ever really pin down, or whether, once lost, It simply became another cold thing moving under the surface, felt but never fully seen. Closing arguments started on a Wednesday, under a sky so blue it felt rude. The courthouse steps were packed again. Cameras, microphones, people who'd taken off work just to be there. Inside, the air hummed with that particular silence you only get before something irreversible happens. The jurors filed in, more tired than when they'd been chosen. Dark circles, tighter jaws. They'd been carrying this case on their backs for days. Now they were going to be asked to set it down somewhere permanent. Holloway stood first. No notes in his hands. He'd rehearsed this 100 times in his head. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "if this case were just about grief, you'd have been done the first day. Grief is obvious. It's written on every face in this room. But this case is also about responsibility. About what we do when the truth takes 20 years to show its face." He moved slowly in front of the jury box, voice quiet, forcing them to lean in. "You've heard a lot of testimony. You've seen a lot of charts. Strip all of that away, and here's what remains. A neighbor with daily access to a 15-year-old girl. A bracelet belonging to that girl, hidden in his locked trunk, stained with her blood. His DNA on fabric found in the canal area, where we believe she was taken. Lies and omissions when asked about what he had, what he kept, what he did." He paused, letting the list sit. "You've also heard about another man. Someone who smoked under her window. Someone who took her picture at a park. The defense wants you to chase him down every corridor of your mind until you forget who is actually sitting at this table. Don't let them. Evan Mallory may very well have to answer for his role in all of this one day. But he is not on trial here. Brian Keller is." He pointed at the evidence table, not at the defendant. "The cigarette under the window? It tells us this crime was not committed in a vacuum. Of course other people were near that house that week. Of course there were shadows we didn't see. But the presence of other shadows doesn't erase the fingerprint we do have. A stranger smoking beneath her window doesn't explain a broken bracelet hidden in a trunk for 2 decades. His voice sharpened slightly. "The defense will tell you that every gap is a doubt. That every mistake the police made 20 years ago is a reason to walk away today. Ask yourself, is that justice for Amber? For her family? For this community? Our system does not require perfection. It requires proof. And proof is exactly what we've given you. Not speculation. Not rumor. Evidence." He turned, meeting each juror's eyes in turn. "You don't have to know every detail of what happened in that house. You don't have to see the body to know a child did not vanish into thin air. You are allowed to use your common sense. A trusted neighbor with access, opportunity, and her blood-stained bracelet in his possession. That is not coincidence. That is guilt." He took a breath. "You are the only ones who can speak for her now. 20 years too late, yes. But better late than never. We ask you to find the defendant guilty." He sat. The quiet afterward felt heavier than any applause could have. Chun rose slowly, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her jacket. She stood a beat without speaking, letting the silence reset. "You've just heard a powerful story," she said at last. "It's compelling. It's emotional. It's also incomplete." She stepped closer to the jury box, not invading, just approaching. "My colleague says the system doesn't require perfection. That's true. But it does require certainty. Not certainty that something terrible happened, we know that. Certainty that this man did it." She gestured to Keller without looking at him. "I'm going to ask you to do something difficult. I'm going to ask you to put aside the headlines you've seen. The words cold case solved, that have been burned into this town's brain. I'm going to ask you to walk back through the evidence with me and notice something the state keeps asking you to ignore. How much we simply don't know." She lifted a sheet of paper. "We don't know who took Amber from her room. We have no eyewitness, no confession, no footage, no body. We don't know how she died. We don't know when she died. We don't know where her remains are. Those are not small gaps. Those are canyons." She laid the paper down. "What do we have? A bracelet. In a trunk. With her blood on it. Could the blood have gotten there from violence? Yes. Could it also have gotten there from any cut, any scrape, any nosebleed in a teenage girl's life? Also yes. The bracelet was broken. Could that mean a struggle? Yes. Could it mean a weak clasp? Yes again. The state has chosen the story they like better. Choosing a story is not the same as proving one." She moved to the next piece. "We have DNA on a scrap of fabric from a canal area used by fishermen, teenagers, dog walkers, and yes, my client. You heard the expert. No way to know when it was deposited. 2003, 2013, last month. No way to tie that fabric to the moment she disappeared. It is a dot, dangling in space, that they have decided to connect to their drawing. She picked up the cigarette report. And then we have this. The one piece of physical evidence, actually tied to the night she vanished. A cigarette, but found directly beneath her bedroom window after she disappeared. Tested with modern methods. Matched not to my client, but to another man. A man who took her picture at the park. A man whose own ex described his habit of sitting in his car and watching people. A man whose DNA places him exactly where you'd expect the abductor to be. Her voice stayed calm, but steel threaded through it now. He is not on trial. You cannot convict him in your heads and call that justice. What you can do is recognize that his existence, his actions, his cigarette, create more than a shadow. They create a reasonable doubt. You cannot look at him, at that window, at that log of a disturbance near the canal that was never properly investigated, and still say, we are sure it was the neighbor. She stepped back. The state says closure is owed. Maybe it is. But closure is not your job. Your job is to make sure that in our hunger for an ending, we do not write the wrong name at the bottom of the story. Brian Keller may be a fool. He may be a hoarder of memories that make no sense to you. He may have kept a bracelet for reasons even he can't articulate. What the state has not shown you, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that he is a murderer. Her eyes moved across their faces one last time. If you walk out of here with questions about the cigarette, about the blue car, about the disturbance call that was never truly followed up, then the law is very clear. You must find him not guilty. That is not a loophole. That is the system working the way it was designed to, erring, if it must err, on the side of not destroying a life on a maybe. She sat down. The judge gave instructions. Legal language about burdens and standards, and what beyond a reasonable doubt means. Then the bailiff stood and said the words that always change a room. All rise for the jury. They filed out, carrying the weight of Palmetto Bay's longest night on their shoulders. Outside the courtroom, the noise started immediately. Cameras shoved forward. Reporters speculated live. Social feeds lit up with half-informed verdicts before the real one had even begun. Inside, on a bench in the hallway, Karen and Mark sat side by side, hands clasped so tightly their knuckles were nearly the same color as the marble floor. How long do you think it will take? Mark asked quietly. However long it takes to decide what kind of story they can live with, Karen replied. Her voice didn't shake. It was past that. She stared straight ahead at the closed deliberation room door, as if she could see through it. In that room, 12 people started talking. At first, softly, cautiously. Then louder. Juror 2, a school counselor, thought the bracelet was everything. Why else keep it? She said. Why hide it? Innocent people don't stash trophies in trunks. Juror 7, a mechanic, pointed at the cigarette. Innocent people also don't smoke under a kid's window, he countered. DNA doesn't lie. Somebody else was there. He's sitting out there watching this trial like TV. Juror 9, who'd been a teenager in Palmetto Bay in 2003, remembered the search parties. The helicopters. The photos taped everywhere. We can't just let him walk, she whispered. Somebody has to answer for this.